Thank you for staying with us. You're still watching TVC Breakfast Saturday. Let's move on now. A typical day here in Lagos, you'd see loud or hear loud car horns in traffic, clubs playing loud music, and of course, you can fill up, the list. The list is endless. All of this constitutes noise pollution in Lagos. And according to the state's Environmental Protection Agency, the standard approved noise level in residential areas shall not exceed 56 decibels during the day and 45 decibels at night.
But how many are aware of the level of noise pollution in Lagos, and how can this be reduced to the barest minimum? Joining us on the program this morning is the General Manager, Lagos State Environmental Protection Agency, Dr. Babatunde Ajayi. Many thanks for joining us on the program.
Thank you. I see your namesakes. Is that why the green is so wide?
Yeah. Thanks so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
Talking about noise pollution in Lagos State, there's this decibel that people need to be aware of. How many are aware about this?
I think that for the level of engagement and the level of publicity, advocacy, enlightenment across different strata of society that we do, we know that the decent population of Lagos definitely know what is permissible and what makes sense in different categories of areas. So you have school areas, you have residential, you have mixed use areas, commercial areas, and industrial areas. For each of these areas, there are different permissible limits. But of course, because most people are in residential areas, or most areas are residential, so 65 or 55 and 45 makes total sense. And people know, really. Even without measuring, the average person can even tell what sounds normal. Right.
55 during the day.
And
45 at night.
Yes.
And so I think the latter part of last year, I could be wrong though, but we did, you couldn't miss it. It was in your face, basically. Churches, mosques, entertainment centers falling under the axe, so to speak, having to be shut down on the orders of government. Help us, and then early this year, we are hearing of a task force that falls under your direct mandate.
That's correct.
Help us understand where Lagos State is coming from and where this is going.
So first, we are coming from the position of a city that will not stop growing, that keeps expanding. And it therefore means that commercial activity will inadvertently find its way into residential communities. Some of the commercial activity that are not clearly described as commercial would include religious activity, right? Churches, mosques, they are intertwined with residential activity. Mosques are very close to houses, churches, the same thing. And their activity or their noise activity will clearly impact on the communities around them. So over the past few months, in fact, in the past year, we have enforced every week, and we have published on our social media handles and in the media generally. And this enforcement, we think, is one of the strongest forms of advocacy. Beyond just talking to them, we gather them twice a year. Everybody in that space, in the noise economy, we gather them twice a year. We have engagements with them, we have extensive discussions with them. But we also know that it is when we enforce that the news or that the information goes out the fastest, right? So we publish our enforcement. And we know that because the city is expanding, people will continue to, they would continue incursions into residential neighborhoods with their commercial activity. So the constant need to remind them that you cannot do these kinds of things in residential areas. You must be mindful of your neighbor's sleep.
Okay.
And, that's what we keep drumming into people's minds.
What's the process like for noise pollution? Because you can't just come and do the enforcement without someone telling you.
Yeah.
When you are informed about a noise pollution in a particular area. So what do you do as an agency?
Well, first, as individuals, there are many reporting lines. So everywhere you can find LASEPA, you can report, meaning social media, our websites, we have WhatsApp numbers, phone calls, and things like that. But all of that reporting system is documented, on one dashboard. And then we'll communicate with the airing organization, whether it's a restaurant, a lounge, club, event center, church, mosque, shrine, irrespective of your activity. So long as your activity exceeds our permissible limits, we will send you a communication. Secondly, we will invite you for a meeting at our zonal offices. We have 20 of them, and each of those offices is present in the local government. So we'll invite you for a meeting and engage you decently. Then we send you a second warning, which is what we call a pre-sanction warning. It means that if you don't heed to this warning, we will seal. We're not mad people, so we don't just go around shutting businesses down. There are over 30,000 of these activities in residential neighborhoods. It is not realistic that we will shut everybody down. Unfortunately, people who even report are impatient about the speed
Action.
or the pace at which we shut down. But we think that people can reason with you. If you engage the first time, engage the second time, and the person doesn't heed, then we'll shut down, right? And we shut down for minimum 72 hours before we call you back to the table to sign an
Is there a
MOU and
fine
things like that.
to pay?
Of course, there is a fine. It costs government to shut you down. It costs, the entire enforcement process is not cheap. It costs government money. And of course, it is also punitive. We are a society that is trying to grow the culture of consequence. Without consequence, people will go back to what they're doing. So fines are just one of the measures or one of the consequences that you will face if you breach the environmental protocols.
So in essence, the state government is saying that we really cannot rule out, businesses like this in residential areas, but they must conform to acceptable levels. Because one question that will probably come through one's mind is, why did the government even give approval for them to be set up in that residence, in that area of residence in the first place? Because then they would have to, they would ride under the wings of legality. I have my permit, so to speak. But then the people in the area also are entitled to privacy, to enjoying their quiet moments and all of that. But you're telling us now that there is a need for balance. Is that basically what you're saying?
Absolutely. So you must create balance in every society, every community. And we also must realize that places will morph, right? There are areas that used to be, growing up in Surulere, for instance, there were areas we knew used to be totally residential. Adeyangusan was one of them. Today, the entire road is commercial, right? Because areas will morph. People will bring new businesses. People will try to establish big things, and it is totally fine. There are regulations that you must follow before you set up an organization like, a church, a studio, for instance. You must soundproof it. Now, without the soundproofing and a clearance, of soundproofing, you shouldn't be able to open a church in a residential neighborhood, because you will definitely cause problems for your neighbors. So yes, there are regulations. Yes, people may not strictly adhere to them, and which is why we try to manage the situation and manage everybody. Does
Lagos have what it takes? We're looking at it may not be big in terms of land mass, but where people live, there are incredible places where people live, and there is the sense that government's presence is not exactly felt there. So somebody who is being deprived of his privacy, for example, may feel that, how do I even reach out to government? How do I even express my displeasure or place a report with government? Are you saying, with all that you have said now, the officers, LASEPA officers, are well on ground to handle all complaints?
Of course. So there is not one complaint that has not been treated.
Okay.
And this is the structure that we have set up over time. So long as you have made a complaint on any of our channels, it has been treated. Now, people initially, when you're making your report, we will clearly ask you if you want to remain anonymous, right? That anonymity clause will also, make sure that you are not involved in the discussion process with the person you're complaining about. And therefore, you then come back and say that, oh, this complaint has not been treated. But every single complaint has been treated or will be treated within a 72-hour period. Now, what then happens is, if people are recalcitrant, then we have to send in warnings, then we have to go to seal, and then they have to come to the table and face the consequence, pay fines, go through the punitive process that we have put in place.
I've seen your agency close down churches, mosques, entertainment centers. What about shrines? Is it that they don't make noise?
So shrines make noise within certain limits,
Okay.
right? Most of our traditional belief systems, most of the activity is mobile, right? So you have Egungun or any kind of festival. A lot of them are moving, you know. So it's just for a short period, moving during the day, and that's it.
Your agency, you've not had any encounter
We
shutting?
have. we have. I mean, and there are videos,
Okay.
there are pictures. There are pictures on our social media where actually Kai demolished a shrine somewhere in Surulere. Couple others, we've had to shut down a few traditional activities in Ikorodu and one other place, I think Lagos Island. But we definitely have dealt with them. They are not as defiant because their variation is not as wide as the Christian or Muslim faith, right? So they are not as defiant. If you tell them, and most of them are members of the community, so if you tell them, oh, you need to stop this at this time, easily, they listen to the traditional rulers. So if you tell the traditional rulers this is the rule that Lasepa has set down, they will follow it. They are part of us. They listen more. They are easier to manage than the work setup.
So what's the feedback like when you have public campaigns? I'm particularly interested in this. So I lay a report. You talked about having to engage, quote and unquote, with the business owner, for example, before you now clamp down. If there is no feedback from the end, then government is forced to clamp down. Yes. But what's the feedback like on the level of cooperation on the part of business owners, religious houses, and all of that? Are there challenges that the government is struggling with, or how are you able to meet or beat those challenges?
So the first concern I would say is that we're proposing an incremental punishment system.
How
much
much
is that? No, it doesn't have to be money.
That question was general, really. I wasn't looking at money.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, like an extension of the length of shutdown, for instance.
From 72 hours?
From 72 hours to 3 weeks or to 5 weeks. You will lose time, revenue, and then you will learn your lessons. What we have realized is that if you're shut down for 72 hours or even 4 days, you will comply for another 6 weeks and then go ballistic again. It's a recurring pattern.
So you're having recurrent offenders?
Yes. So for recurring offenders, we're increasing the punitive measures. So if you're coming if we're shutting you down a second time, you probably will have to be sealed for 2 weeks at least. A third time.
But that's not in the law presently.
Yes, that's not in the law. But it is also, the law also empowers us, gives us jurisdiction to stipulate punitive measures. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we've run out of time, and we hope that we will get to see, or we are getting towards a saner Lagos.
Before we let him go,
I
hope there are no foul plays where some set of people don't like that particular church or mosque. They just come to report
and crank calls and all of that.
Forms of
so
allegations on them.
Should I be honest?
Okay.
There's a ton of that. Like we get up to 30% of that.
Of what?
People really? Of complaints.
So how do you now make your findings?
Yeah, that's why we have to engage. That's why we will confirm those allegations or confirm whatever complaints you have sent to us. So if you've measured, there's evidence. If you've measured with a decibel meter, we have what you've seen. We've seen what you have, and then we'll come there, check. And
all right. Dr. Tunde Ajayi, we thank you very much for your time, and we wish you and the rest of your team all the best in achieving a saner Lagos. Indeed.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.